When Mark and I first heard someone was finally moving into the vacant house next door, we didn't think much of it. New neighbors came and went all the time, and most never became more than polite waves across the driveway. But from the moment Daniel and Emily arrived, things felt different. They were younger than us by a few years, stylish, and carried a kind of confidence that instantly drew attention. I remember standing at our kitchen window, watching them unload boxes from the moving truck. Daniel laughed loudly at something Emily said, and for a moment, I envied the lightness between them. A few days later, we decided to walk over with a small gift basket. Mark insisted it was the neighborly thing to do. Daniel opened the door, tall and charismatic, with an energy that filled the space before he even spoke. He welcomed us inside like we were old friends, and Emily followed behind him, softer, quieter, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They invited us to sit down, and soon we were sharing coffee and talking about everything from work to travel. The connection formed quickly. Within a week, we were having dinners together, exchanging stories late into the night. Mark enjoyed Daniel's humor, and I found myself drawn to Emily's thoughtful silence. She wasn't shy exactly, more like she preferred to listen, observing everything around her. When she did speak, it was deliberate, as though she'd been weighing every word before releasing it. It was during one of those dinners that Daniel first made a remark that unsettled me. He complimented the way Mark looked at me across the table, saying it was rare to see a couple still so deeply connected. Mark laughed, brushing it off, but Daniel didn't. He leaned in slightly, his smile lingering in a way that made me feel both flattered and exposed. Emily said nothing, only studied me with that same quiet intensity. Over the next few weeks, Daniel began dropping comments that carried a sharper edge. "You two must have the perfect relationship," he'd say. His tone playful but his eyes locked on mine. "I bet other people could learn a lot from you." It was the kind of statement that seemed harmless on the surface, but each time he said it, I felt a small chill run through me. One evening, after we'd shared a bottle of wine between the four of us, Daniel leaned back in his chair and said something that made the air in the room shift. "You know," he began casually, "sometimes the strongest couples are the ones who aren't afraid to be observed, just to prove to themselves how unshakable their bond really is." Mark laughed, shaking his head. "Observed? What, like we're in some kind of experiment?" Daniel chuckled too, but his gaze didn't waver. "Not an experiment. More like inspiration. Watching love in its rawest form can remind you of your own." I felt Emily's eyes on me then, steady and unblinking. She didn't interrupt, didn't laugh. She simply watched my reaction, as though she was waiting for me to reveal something. The conversation moved on quickly, but the weight of Daniel's words stayed with me. That night, when Mark and I were alone, I asked him if he'd noticed how odd the remark was. He shrugged, saying Daniel was just being eccentric, maybe a little too open-minded. "He's harmless," Mark insisted, pulling me closer. But I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. The more time we spent with them, the more I noticed how often Daniel steered conversations toward boundaries, temptation, and trust. He had a way of wrapping controversial ideas in charm, making them sound like harmless curiosities instead of something darker. Emily remained the quiet shadow, but her silence only made me more uneasy. I began to wonder if she agreed with him, or if she was trapped in the pull of his personality the way we seemed to be. Then came the night that changed everything. We were sitting in their living room, another casual evening with drinks and conversation. The laughter had faded into a heavier kind of silence when Daniel suddenly leaned forward. His voice dropped, low and deliberate. "Tell me, Mark, Sophie," he said, his eyes flicking between us, "would you ever let someone watch you? Just to learn, to understand what real connection looks like?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Mark blinked, caught off guard, and let out a nervous chuckle. But he didn't dismiss it right away. He looked at me, searching my face, as though wondering if I might actually consider the question. My heart raced, not from curiosity but from a gnawing sense that a door had just been opened, one that could never be closed again. Mark's laugh faded quickly after Daniel asked that question, but he didn't say no. That silence was worse than any answer. I felt my chest tighten as I waited for him to dismiss the idea, to tell Daniel it was ridiculous. Instead, Mark leaned back in his chair and tried to turn it into a joke. "That's an unusual question," he said, glancing at me with a half-smile, as if I might find it amusing too. But I didn't. Daniel noticed. He noticed everything. His smile widened, satisfied, as though the seed he had planted had already taken root. "I know it sounds strange," he continued, "but trust me, you'd be surprised what people can learn just by observing. No touching, no lines crossed. Just watching." His voice was calm, persuasive, like he was explaining something perfectly logical. Emily sat curled on the sofa beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning either. She just sat there staring at me, waiting. I felt trapped in that gaze, like she knew more than she was willing to say. When we left their house that night, I didn't speak until we were back in our driveway. "You didn't shut it down," I said sharply. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because it didn't mean anything, sophomore. He's just unconventional. It's all theory to him. You're reading too much into it." But I wasn't. Something in my gut told me this wasn't theory to Daniel. This was practice. And before I could push the conversation further, Mark pulled me into his arms and said, "Look, even if he ever brought it up again, it's not like we'd actually do it." Except Daniel did bring it up again. And again. Each time the question was phrased differently, but the intent was the same. He spoke of freedom, of trust, of bonds that couldn't be broken by something as simple as being seen. His persistence wore down my resistance, and what scared me most was how calmly Mark absorbed it all. He never fully agreed, but he never shut the door either. The night we finally said yes didn't feel real. It was a Saturday, and Daniel and Emily came over after dinner. The air was heavy before anything had even happened. No one said aloud what was about to take place, but the unspoken agreement pressed down on me. Mark tried to keep it light-hearted, pouring drinks, turning on music. But I could see the tension in his hands, the way they trembled slightly as he set the glasses down. Daniel suggested we dim the lights. "For comfort," he said. The room shifted into shadow, and suddenly everything felt smaller, tighter. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Emily and Daniel sat together, side by side, while Mark reached for me. His touch was familiar, grounding, yet somehow foreign with their eyes on us. At first, I tried to pretend it was only Mark and me. I tried to ignore the presence of the others, the weight of their stares. But the truth pressed in quickly. Every move felt exaggerated, every sound amplified. My mind kept circling back to one unbearable thought. We are being watched. Mark seemed energized, more alive than usual. He glanced toward Daniel once, and I caught the flicker of pride in his expression, as though he was proving something. That cut me deeper than anything. He wasn't just with me in that moment. He was performing for them. And then, through the haze of my unease, I heard Emily's voice for the first time all evening. She leaned closer to me, her words soft but deliberate, meant only for my ears. "He's done this before," she whispered. The world seemed to tilt. I turned toward her, but her face remained unreadable, her eyes locked on mine. I wanted to ask what she meant, but Mark's hand tightened on mine, pulling me back. My voice stuck in my throat. Her words replayed again and again. "He's done this before." That knowledge poisoned everything. Suddenly I wasn't just uneasy. I was complicit in something practiced, something Daniel had orchestrated before with other couples, other unsuspecting people. And now we were part of it. When it was over, I couldn't even look at Mark. My body felt cold, my skin foreign. Daniel leaned forward, smiling like a teacher pleased with his students. "See, nothing broken. If anything, stronger than before." His tone was casual, almost mocking. But before we left, he dropped the next stone. "Next time," he said slowly, his eyes fixed on me. We could take it further. Mark didn't answer. And that silence was louder than anything he could have said. Word count. 761. The silence that followed Daniel's suggestion clung to me for days. Mark never acknowledged it, never brought it up, but I could feel the weight of it in every glance, every conversation we avoided. It wasn't just what Daniel had said. It was that Mark hadn't shut it down. His silence had been permission, whether he realized it or not. I tried to move past it, to convince myself that it had been a one-time mistake, an experiment gone too far. But the truth was, something between us had shifted. I no longer felt the safety I once did when Mark reached for me. Instead, I felt suspicion, a gnawing question I couldn't shake. Was he curious about what further meant? The argument came sooner than I expected. I confronted him one night in the kitchen, unable to hold it in any longer. You let it happen, I said, my voice trembling. You didn't protect us. You didn't protect me. Mark's face tightened. Protect you from what? They didn't touch us. Nothing happened. Everything happened, I snapped back. Do you even hear yourself? You think this was about touching? It was about letting them inside something that belonged only to us. For a moment, his anger flared. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was harmless. Harmless, I whispered. Because you liked it. Saw you, Mark. You wanted them to see you. You wanted Daniel to see you. He froze, caught, and I knew I was right. His silence confirmed it more than any words could. The next day, Emily showed up at my door. She stood there with a hesitant smile, as though unsure if I'd slam the door in her face. I let her in, curiosity outweighing my resentment. She sat down at the table, her hands twisting in her lap, and for the first time she looked fragile. I need to tell you something, she said softly. Daniel, he's done this before. With other couples. It always starts the same. He pushes, convinces them it's harmless, and then he asks for more. Always more. I thought maybe with you it would be different, but it's not. It never is. My stomach nodded. Why do you stay? Asked. Her eyes glistened. Because he convinced me to. A long time ago. And by the time I realized what he was doing, it was easier to stay silent than to leave. I thought maybe if other people saw it, if they felt it, they'd understand what he really is. But no one ever does. Until it's too late. Her words cracked something open in me. I had thought I was protecting my marriage, that Daniel was the intruder. But now I saw that Mark had welcomed the door being opened. He had chosen to step through it. When I told Mark what Emily had said, he didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. She's exaggerating, he muttered. But his eyes betrayed him. There was guilt there, and a kind of shame he couldn't hide. The confrontation with Daniel came a few nights later. Mark wanted to avoid it, but I insisted. I couldn't live under the same roof, in the same neighborhood, with the truth festering between us. We met in Daniel and Emily's living room, the four of us. The air was suffocating, thick with everything unspoken. Daniel sat back, calm and composed, as though he'd been expecting this. You set us up, I told him, my voice sharp. He tilted his head, smiling faintly. Set you up. Well, he offered. You agreed. That's the difference. People reveal who they really are when given the chance. His eyes flicked toward Mark. And he revealed himself. Mark's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That silence, again, was louder than anything else in the room. Emily broke then. Tears streamed down her face as she turned on Daniel. You destroy people, she cried. You feed on their weakness. And I've let you. I've been complicit all this time. Daniel didn't flinch. He just looked at her the way one might look at a child throwing a tantrum. People make their own choices, he said coolly. But for me the truth was clear. It wasn't Daniel who shocked me most. It wasn't even Emily's confession. It was Mark, my husband. Because in the moment he should have protected me. He chose not to. He chose curiosity, pride, and the thrill of being seen. When we left that house, I didn't speak to Mark. Couldn't. All I could think about was that night when Daniel had asked his question, "Would you let someone watch?" And how Mark hadn't said no. That silence had been the beginning of the end. And as I tell this now, what shocks me most isn't Daniel's manipulation. It isn't Emily's silence. It's that the man I trusted, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, was willing to betray me the moment he let them inside.